Imagine you have built the most successful shipping company in human history. Your logistics are flawless. Your ships are miracles of efficiency, carrying more cargo, more reliably than anyone ever thought possible. You're the undisputed king of the sea. But one day, you look up and you realize the world has started to travel by plane. Your ships are perfect, but are they pointed in the right direction? This is the paradox of modern Apple. By every financial metric, Tim Cook is the most successful CEO in history. He took the house that Steve Jobs built and turned it into a global empire worth over $3 trillion. But a series of recent high profile stumbles, a phantom car that vanished after a decade, a panic scramble to catch up in the AI race, and a technological marvel that no one seems to know what to do with, have raised a ghost. A question that haunts the pristine glass halls of Apple Park. Has the company, in its quest for operational perfection, lost its soul? To understand the Apple of today, you have to understand the Apple that almost wasn't. To grasp the scale of Tim Cook's achievements, you must first grasp the depth of the crisis he inherited. Not in 2011, but the one his predecessor faced in 1997. It is here in the ashes of the old Apple that the company's soul was forged. The late 1990s were not kind to Apple Computer, the company that had once reinvented the personal computer in the 1980s with the Macintosh was, by 1997, a shadow of its former self. After the ousting of its co founder Steve Jobs in 1985, Apple entered a prolonged wilderness period, a downward spiral of failed products and strategic missteps. The company introduced a series of commercial flops, most notably the Newton Message Pad, a clunky and expensive personal digital assistant that was ridiculed for its poor handwriting recognition and ultimately discontinued by Jobs himself upon his return. In the fiscal year ending in September 1997, Apple reported a staggering net loss of over $1 billion. The company was, by Jobs' own estimation, just 90 days from being insolvent. Its stock had cratered, losing about 80% of its value between 1992 and 1997, even as the rest of the tech industry, powered by the dot-com boom, soared. But the financial numbers were merely a symptom of a much deeper disease, a complete loss of vision. The product line had become a chaotic, sprawling mess. At one point, Apple was selling dozens of different models, including over 12 distinct versions of the Macintosh, and a baffling array of Performa computers, many of which were nearly identical but had different model numbers to satisfy various retailers. The lineup was so confusing that when a friend of the family asked Jobs which Apple computer she should buy, he was appalled to find he couldn't give her a clear answer. This product chaos was the direct result of a company without a guiding philosophy. It was an organization run by committee, chasing market share by catering to the demands of the retailers rather than leading with a singular cohesive product strategy. It was a company that had lost its why. This was the state of Apple when it turned in desperation to the man who might be able to save it. In 1997, in a move that would become the stuff of business legends, Apple acquired Next, the computer company Jobs had founded after his departure, for $400 million. The primary goal was to use Next's advanced operating system as the foundation for the next generation of Mac OS. But the real prize was the return of Steve Jobs himself, who came back first as an advisor and then as interim CEO. His first actions were not those of a gentle caretaker, but of a ruthless surgeon cutting away the disease. He reviewed Apple's bloated product roadmap and, in a now famous move, slashed 70% of the company's products. He killed the Neuron, the Mac clones, the printers, and the peripherals. After weeks of meetings, he famously shouted stop in the middle of a product review, went to a whiteboard, and drew a simple 2x2 grid. The columns were consumers and pro. The rows were desktop and portable. This, he declared, was the new Apple. The company would focus all of its energy on making just 4 great products. This act of brutal simplification was an expression of pure vision, but Jobs paired it with a stunning act of pragmatism. To stabilize the company's finances, he turned to Apple's arch-rival, Microsoft. In a move that shocked the industry and was met with boos from the faithful at the Macworld Expo, Jobs announced that Bill Gates' Microsoft would invest $150 million dollars in Apple. The deal also guaranteed that Microsoft would continue to develop Microsoft Office for the Mac, a critical piece of software needed to keep its professional and education customers from abandoning the platform. The moment reveals the duality at the core of Jobs' genius. He was an uncompromising visionary when it came to his products, but he was also a ruthless pragmatist when it came to survival. He would partner with his greatest enemy to secure the foundation he needed, but he would not compromise on the purity of his four product vision. It was this unique blend of pragmatism and idealism that set the stage for Apple's resurrection. Before Apple could sell a single new computer, Steve Jobs knew he had to sell a new idea of Apple. The brand was tarnished, seen as a relic of a bygone era. To change that perception, he enlisted the ad agency TBWI Sky at Die, the same firm behind the iconic 1984 ad to craft a new message. The result was the Think Different campaign launched in 1997. It was a masterpiece of brand repositioning. The campaign's television commercial and print ads featured striking black and white portraits of historical icons Albert Einstein, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., and John Lennon. These were, as the narration voiced by actor Richard Dreyfuss explained, the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers. The ads deliberately avoided showing any products. They don't talk about processor speeds or megabytes of RAM. They sold an identity. The message was clear. Apple was not for everyone. It was for the people who challenged the status quo, the creative geniuses who pushed the human race forward. The slogan itself, Think Different, was a deliberate grammatical choice. Jobs insisted on different as a noun, like think victory, to embody a state of being, not just an action. He was deeply involved in the campaign's creation, personally calling Yoko Ono to get permission to use a photo of John Lennon. This campaign was as much for the demoralized employees inside Apple as it was for the public. It was Jobs selling the company's soul back to itself, reminding everyone what Apple was supposed to be about. It rallied the faithful and redefined the brand around a set of powerful aspirational values. The culture was being set, the products would soon follow. With the philosophy reestablished, the products that embodied it arrived with seismic impact. The first was the iMac in 1998. It was a radical departure from the sea of beige utilitarian boxes that defined the PC market. Designed by Johnny Ive, the iMac was a colorful, translucent, all in one computer that was as much a fashion statement as a piece of technology. Jobs proudly declared that the back of our computer looks better than the front of our competitor's computer. The I in iMac stood for Internet, and the machine was designed to get users online simply and quickly. It famously did away with the floppy disk drive, a legacy technology in favor of the new Universal Serial Bus (USB) standard, a move that was controversial at that time but ultimately prescient. The iMac was an instant commercial success. Apple sold 800,000 units in its first year, and the company swung from a $1 billion loss in 1997 to a $309 million profit in 1998. The computer that saved Apple was born. 3 years later, in 2001, came the next revolution, the iPod. Apple was not the first company to make a digital music player, but existing MP3 players were, in Jobs' view, either big and clunky or small and useless, with unbelievably awful user interfaces. Working with a team led by engineer Todi Fadell, Apple created a device that was both elegant and powerful. It combined a tiny 5 GB hard drive with an intuitive scroll wheel that allowed users to navigate their music collection with ease. The promise was simple and powerful: 1,000 songs in your pocket. But the true genius of the iPod was not just the hardware. It was the seamless integration with the iTunes software and the iTunes Music Store, launched in 2003. For the first time, users could legally and easily purchase digital songs for 99 cents and sync them effortlessly to their device. This created a virtuous cycle. The beautiful, easy to use iPod drove people to the iTunes store, and the convenience of the store made the iPod an essential device. It was the birth of the modern Apple ecosystem, a tightly integrated combination of hardware, software, and services. This very model, which would later be perfected and scaled to unimaginable heights by Tim Cook, was planted here. The iPod and iTunes didn't just dominate the market, capturing over 90% of sales. They established the playbook for Apple's future dominance. The period from 2007 to 2010 marked the apex of the Jobs era, defined by his iconic One More Thing reveals at the end of his keynote presentations. These were the moments he unveiled the products that will not just define Apple, but define the modern world. In January 2007, Jobs took the stage and announced that Apple was introducing three revolutionary products: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. Then came the reveal. This was not three separate devices. It was one device, and it was called the iPhone. The iPhone did away with the physical keyboards that were standard on all other smartphones of the era, replacing them with a large multi-touch display that users could control with just their fingers. The competition was dismissive. Steve Ballmer, then CEO of Microsoft, famously laughed at the iPhone's prospects, declaring it had no chance of gaining any significant market share because of its high price and lack of physical keyboard. Executives at BlackBerry Maker Research in Motion were similarly in disbelief. They saw the world through the lens of existing products and business models. They were trying to shrink a computer. Jobs, however, had redefined the problem. He wasn't just trying to build a better smartphone. He was trying to create a magical user experience. He started with the experience and worked backward to the technology, a philosophy he often articulated. He famously said that people don't know what they want until you show it to them, and he believed his job was to envision a better future and build it. He applied the same philosophy in 2010 with the iPod. At that time, the industry was chasing netbooks, cheap, underpowered, and clunky laptops. Jobs ignored this trend entirely. Instead, he introduced a third category of device, one that sat between the smartphone and the laptop. To demonstrate its purpose, he didn't stand at a podium. He sat down in a comfortable leather chair on stage, showing the iPad as a device for a relaxed, lean back experience of browsing the web, reading books, and watching videos. It was initially met with skepticism and derided by many as just a big iPhone, a product without a clear purpose. But once again, Jobs had seen a need people didn't know they had. These creations were the result of an intense, singular focus, powered by what became his most famous philosophy: the power of saying no. As he once said, people think focus means saying yes to the thing you've got to focus on, but that's not what it means at all. It means saying no to the 100 other good ideas that there are. You have to pick carefully. I'm actually as proud of the things we haven't done as the things I have done. Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. This was the Jobsian model of innovation at its peak. It was not about market research or incremental improvements. It was about having a powerful, intuitive, and often contrarian point of view about what a product should be, and then executing that vision with uncompromising focus and the force of will, even when the rest of the world thought it was crazy. This is the benchmark, the very soul of innovation, against which the Apple of today must be measured. When Steve Jobs passed away in 2011, the world asked a single anxious question: what would happen to Apple? The company's identity was so intertwined with its visionary founder that many predicted its innovative spark would die with him. They feared the magic was gone. What they failed to understand was that the man Jobs had chosen as his successor, Tim Cook, possessed a different kind of magic: the magic of the operator. He was a quiet genius who had been working behind the scenes for over a decade, building the machine that would turn Jobs' creation into a global empire. Tim Cook joined Apple in March 1998, a decision that, at that time, seemed like a career suicide. He left a secure position as vice president of corporate materials at Compaq, then a dominant PC maker, to join a company that was still teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. But Cook saw a once in a lifetime opportunity to work for the creative genius and to help resurrect a great American company. His role was Senior Vice President for Worldwide Operations, and he was a master of the craft. In an industry where managing inventory was often an afterthought, Cook saw the supply chain as a strategic weapon. He was ruthless in his pursuit of efficiency. He closed Apple's factories and warehouses, shifting to a model of working with contract manufacturers. He slashed the number of suppliers from over 100 to just 24. Most famously, he transformed Apple's inventory management, reducing the amount of products sitting in warehouses from months to mere days. He loathed inventory, calling it fundamentally evil, and comparing it to dairy products that could spoil. This operational brilliance was the invisible engine behind Apple's comeback. Cook made massive strategic advance purchases of key components like flash memory for the iPod and air freight capacity during the holiday season, ensuring Apple had a stable supply while competitors scrambled. He built a global logistics machine that could produce and deliver millions of complex devices with clockwork precision. He wasn't the product guy in the way Jobs was, but he was the person who made the products possible at a global scale. His leadership style was also the polar opposite of his predecessor. Where Jobs was famously autocratic, charismatic, and often abrasive, Cook was calm, collaborative, and values driven. He fostered a democratic environment, building consensus among his executive team rather than issuing top down directives. He was known for his quiet consideration, his relentless questioning to ensure his teams knew their material, and his focus on people, strategy, and social responsibility. He was, in every way, the operator to Jobs' visionary, and he was exactly what Apple needed to evolve from a comeback story into a global superpower. If Steve Jobs created the iPhone, Tim Cook created the iPhone industrial complex. Under his leadership as COO and then CEO, the iPhone was transformed from a revolutionary product into the single most profitable product in human history. This was not achieved through radical redesigns, but through relentless perfection of the manufacturing and logistics machine he had been building since 1998. The numbers are staggering. In 2011, the year Cook took over as CEO, Apple sold 72 million iPhones. A decade later, in 2021, that number peaked at over 233 million units, with Apple consistently shipping over 200 million phones per year. The revenue generated by the iPhone exploded in tandem, growing from approximately $46 billion in 2011 to over $200 billion annually in recent years. This unimaginable scale was made possible by the massive, complex global supply chain centered in China. Apple, under Cook's direction, partnered with manufacturing giants like Foxconn to build an industrial ecosystem the world had never seen. This wasn't simply about finding cheap labor, as Cook himself has stated. Apple manufactures in China not for the cost, but for the unique and deep concentration of vocational skills. The tooling engineers, the precision manufacturing experts, and the sheer flexibility of a workforce that could be scaled up or down with incredible speed. Apple and its partners invested billions and trained tens of millions of Chinese workers in the art of advanced manufacturing. This machine is Tim Cook's masterpiece. It is what generates the immense, steady torrent of cash that funds everything else at Apple, from its massive R&D budget to its ambitious forays into new categories. The success of the operator created the financial foundation that allowed the company to continue to dream and occasionally to fail on a grand scale. The first major new product to be developed and launched entirely in the post-Jobs era was the Apple Watch, and it served as a crucial test of the new leadership's innovative capability. Work began in 2013 with the goal of creating a prestige product that would prove Apple could still innovate without its founders. When it launched in 2015, its purpose was unclear. The initial marketing was confused, positioning the device as a high fashion accessory. Apple even produced a $10,000 in karat gold edition model, a move that seemed to target a luxury market that was a far cry from its consumer tech roots. The watch was a technological marvel, but it was a product looking for a problem to solve. Unlike the iPhone or iPad, which launched with a singular, clear vision from Jobs, the Apple Watch found its identity through iteration. Apple paid close attention to how early adopters were using the device and saw a clear signal. The health and fitness features were resonating most. In response, the company pivoted. Subsequent generations of the watch doubled down on this purpose. They added built in GPS for tracking runs, enhanced water resistance for swimming, and introduced groundbreaking health sensors for taking an ECG or measuring blood oxygen levels. Features like fall detection turned the watch from a convenience into a potential lifesaver, broadening its appeal to older demographics. This iterative market responsive approach where the Apple Watch became the undisputed leader in the smartwatch category, with a business that is now bigger than the entire Swiss watch industry, including giants like Rolex. Its success proved that the Cook era Apple could indeed launch a hit new product category, but it also revealed a fundamentally different model of innovation. It was a model based on data driven, iterative discovery, not a singular top down vision. It was about finding a path, not creating one from scratch. This success was a testament to the new Apple, but it also reinforced the very premise that the company's soul, the method for creation, had profoundly changed. While perfecting the iPhone's production and launching the Apple Watch were monumental achievements, Tim Cook's most unique and arguably greatest legacy is the creation of Apple's service division. He took what was a minor part of the business and transformed it into a behemoth that, if it were a standalone company, would be the size of a Fortune 50 corporation. The growth has been nothing short of explosive. In 2014, Apple's service revenue was approximately $18 billion. A decade later, in 2024, that figure had ballooned to over $96 billion, a staggering 433% increase. This growth rate has far outpaced that of the iPhone or any other hardware segment. This division encompasses a wide array of digital offerings: the App Store, iCloud, Apple Music, Apple Pay, Apple TV Plus, Apple Arcade, and more. This strategy serves two crucial purposes. First, it provides Apple with a massive and steadily growing stream of high margin, recurring revenue. This makes the company far less dependent on the cyclical and increasingly saturated smartphone market, where replacement cycles have lengthened. Second, it dramatically strengthens the walled garden of the Apple ecosystem. The more a user's digital life is tied to iCloud, Apple Music, and the App Store, the more difficult and inconvenient it becomes to switch to a competing platform like Android. It is the ultimate customer lock in strategy. The following table provides a stark, quantitative illustration of the two eras of Apple. It demonstrates Tim Cook's unparalleled success in scaling the empire that Jobs built, but it also highlights that his most profound contribution was the creation of the service business, which grew at more than double the rate of any other segment. This is the work of the master operator. He perfected Jobs' hardware business, but he created the service empire. With this level of operational and financial genius, one might ask if a few product stumbles even matter. Or do they point to a deeper problem, a crack in the very foundation of Apple's innovative spirit? For all the astronomical financial success of the Tim Cook era, a series of high profile, expensive, and strategically confusing initiatives have begun to raise uncomfortable questions. These projects, undertaken in the most promising technological fields of the future, have so far failed to deliver the kind of world changing impact that once defined Apple. They stand as powerful evidence that the Jobsian magic, the ability to conjure new product categories from a singular, uncompromising vision, may have vanished from the machine. The most glaring example of this is the Apple Car. Codenamed Project Titan, was a decades long odyssey that consumed immense resource and ultimately produced nothing. The project officially ran from 2014 to its cancellation in February 2024. Over that decade, it is estimated to have cost the company over $1 billion per year, for a total expenditure exceeding $10 billion. From the beginning, Project Titan was plagued by a clear lack of vision. It was a project without a Steve. The strategy was in constant chaotic flux. At various times, the goal was to build a full Apple branded electric vehicle to compete with Tesla. At other times, the ambition was scaled back to creating only an autonomous driving software platform that could be licensed to established automakers like Volkswagen or Mercedes Benz. The leadership was a revolving door, with the project cycling multiple executives and suffering from what one insider described as an incredible failure of leadership due to constant infighting over its direction. The project's ambition became its undoing. For much of its life, the team was chasing the holy grail of a fully autonomous Level 5 vehicle with no steering wheel or pedals. A monumental technological leap that proved to be far more difficult than anticipated. This stands in stark contrast to the Jobsian philosophy of shipping a focused, brilliant version 1.0 and then iterating. Project Titan was an attempt to ship a perfect final version from the start, and as a result, it shipped nothing at all. The project's 10 billion plus price tag is also a telling indicator of a cultural shift. The Apple that Jobs led, even at its most successful, was famously focused and disciplined. The Apple led by Tim Cook, flush with hundreds of billion in cash from the iPhone machine, could afford to let a rudderless multi-billion-dollar science project drift for a decade without a clear path to a product. In February 2024, the plug was finally pulled, and the remaining resources were shifted to a new, more urgent priority: generative artificial intelligence. The Ghost Car served as the perfect negative image of a Jobs era project. Its demise was not a failure of engineering, but a failure of vision. The pivot to AI was born of necessity because Apple, the company that had once pioneered the mainstream AI assistant with the launch of Siri in 2011, had been caught completely flat footed by the generative AI revolution. While Siri was once a groundbreaking feature, its development had stagnated for years, with promised major upgrades being repeatedly delayed, now pushed as far out as 2026. When OpenAI launched ChatGPT in late 2022, it sent a shockwave through the tech industry and reportedly threw Apple into a state of panic. The company, which had enjoyed a massive head start in consumer AI, was suddenly seen as a laggard. The result was a frantic multi-year scramble to catch up, culminating in the 2024 announcement of Apple Intelligence. The strategy for Apple Intelligence reveals a new reactive Apple. It is a combination of impressive on-device machine learning models, which process user data locally to protect privacy, and a series of strategic and perhaps humbling partnerships with its direct rivals. To power its most advanced chatbot features, Apple announced it will be integrating OpenAI's ChatGPT directly into Siri and its operating system. The company has also held talks with Google and Anthropic about potentially using their models as well. While this is a pragmatic and smart business move to quickly bring best in class technology to its users, it represents a profound philosophical retreat. Steve Jobs was famous for his obsession with controlling the whole widget, the end to end integration of hardware, software, and services. He would have been deeply reluctant to build a core technology from a major competitor into the heart of his platform. This reliance on partners is an admission that Apple's own in house AI is not, at present, competitive at the highest level. The company that once dictated the terms of the technological landscape is now being forced to react to it, integrating the same tools as everyone else. The final piece of evidence is Apple's most recent attempt at a new product category, the Vision Pro. Launched in early 2024, it is by all accounts a technological masterpiece. It is a testament to the profound engineering and design prowess of the modern Apple, with stunningly high-resolution micro OLED displays and a vision pass-through system that is leagues ahead of any competitor. And yet, as of mid-2025, it has failed to capture the public's imagination. Initial sales have been weak. Early forecasts of selling 700 to 800,000 units in its first year were repeatedly revised downwards to a final figure of around 400 to 500,000. Demand has been so lackluster that reports emerged at the end of 2024 that Apple had ceased production of the first generation model. The complaints are consistent. The 3500 price tag puts it out of reach for all but the most dedicated enthusiasts and developers. At 1.4 pounds, it is physically heavy and uncomfortable to wear for extended periods, leading to neck strain. Its design is inherently isolating, cutting the user off from the world around them. But the most critical issue is the lack of a killer app. There is no single compelling reason for a mainstream consumer to buy the device. Major content providers like Netflix, YouTube, and Spotify have notably declined to develop native applications for the platform. The Vision Pro has many impressive technology demos, but it lacks the simple, intuitive purpose that defined the iPhone or the iPad at their launch. It is a product with a what, but no clear why. This makes the Vision Pro the ultimate cook era. It feels like an engineering led marvel in search of a human centric purpose, the inverse of the Jobsian approach. Jobs started with the user experience. The Vision Pro feels as if the engineers built the most advanced headset technologically possible and then handed it to the marketing department to figure out what to do with it. The term spatial computing is abstract and technical, a far cry from the simple human promise of 1,000 songs in your pocket. It is a solution, a brilliant one, that is still searching for a problem to solve.